A lot of times when people think about publishing a book and becoming an author, they think of traditional publishing, which is a pretty structured process. Essentially, you write an entire book, then you go through editing. So you're going to edit it both yourself and, for some people, outsourcing and hiring a professional editor. Once you have your manuscript as clean and as polished as you can get it, you will start to query editors, which isn't a process I'm too familiar with, but essentially you send your manuscript out to editors and hope that they pick it up and then pitch it to publishers. This is a process where, if you're lucky, it can take a couple of months. If you're not so lucky, it can take several years. While I think traditional publishing is an amazing option for a lot of people, it wasn't for me. My name is Invi Wright. I'm a self-published romance author, and I just kind of want to share what my journey has looked like as a non-traditional author, because I think it's a little unique, but I also think it gives a good insight into, if you want to become an author, you don't necessarily always have to go the traditional publishing route. You can do things on your own, and it may be a little bit more work, or it may take a little longer sometimes, but it's an option. My journey started with serial fiction, which is when you publish books as you write them, chapter by chapter. So instead of publishing a complete full manuscript, you publish it chapter by chapter. So I would write a chapter, go through some edits, publish. Write another chapter, do some edits on it, publish. And I would do that over and over and over again until I had, at the end, a whole story. And when I first started writing, I was writing on free-to-read sites. So I was posting this content for free. And that eventually transitioned over into Patreon, which is a subscription site, so people would have to pay to see that content. There are a couple reasons that I decided to start with serial fiction instead of writing a complete manuscript and then querying and going the more traditional route. The first reason was that for me, writing chapter by chapter kept me motivated. It can be hard to sit down and spend a year or two writing an entire book. I mean, it takes a lot of dedication. And for me personally, what I found is when I was posting chapter by chapter, if somebody left even one comment at the end of my chapter and said, "Oh, I can't wait to see what happens next," I instantly felt motivated to start writing that next chapter. That real-time feedback was huge for me, because objectively, I don't think I could have sat down and written an entire book in one go. I would have given up, or I would have gotten bored and moved on to a new hobby. I would have changed my mind. And so that was huge for me. And then the second reason that I decided to do this serial publishing route was because it helped give me the confidence that I was actually writing a story that people were interested in. My biggest fear is that I would spend all of this time, all of this energy, all of these resources writing this book, and then I go and I start to query agents and I find out nobody cares about it. Nobody's interested in the particular topic or the particular genre or whatever it is I'd written. And so when I was writing it chapter by chapter, I was getting that real-time feedback, and people were very open with me. If they didn't like a direction my story was going, if they didn't like the way I made a character act or the things that they said, they would let me know. I may not have always been able to change it directly in that moment, but I knew when I went ahead later and edited my complete manuscript, I knew exactly what I needed to change, and that was really helpful for me. I felt like it saved me a lot of time and energy. I was going this serial fiction route for a couple of years, and I was pretty content with it. I had my Patreon, I was making enough to cover the bills. It definitely wasn't enough for me to necessarily quit my job and pursue writing full time. But then one day I got a message from somebody, and they were telling me about their journey, and they were telling me that they self-publish their books. Once they finished writing them on Patreon, they self-publish them on Amazon and Kindle Unlimited. And I knew this was an option, but to be completely honest, I was avoiding it because it felt like a lot of work, and I was overwhelmed, and I didn't know where to start. And so I was avoiding it. I will admit it. Their honesty about it really inspired me to at least give it a shot, at least just go. And at this point I had 7 or 8 books completed, full completed manuscripts. They weren't fully edited or anything, but they were written that when I finished them, I just saved them into a file on my computer and started working on the next story. I wasn't really doing anything with them. And so I thought, okay, well, why don't I just take one book, go through the process of editing it and figuring all of this out and just seeing how it does, just seeing if it's something that I think that I could go ahead and really invest time in. And so that's what I did. I went and I took one of my books, a shorter one, so I wasn't spending too much time on this, and I did several rounds of my own revisions, just cleaning up the story, really using that feedback that I was getting from people when I was posting that story in real time to clean it up. Then I found an editor, sent it to her. She did a round of revisions, gave it back to me. I did some more. There was a lot of editing that went into this. And I made my own cover on Canva and published it onto Amazon and Kindle Unlimited. If you're not familiar with the Kindle Unlimited program, it's owned by Amazon. Basically, it's a subscription for readers. So somebody can pay, I think it's $12 or $13 a month, and they get a giant backlog of completed books they can read. I think there are, thousands and thousands and thousands of available books enrolled in this program. And for me, that was the easiest option because I was essentially a brand new author. I'd never published anything before. And I did have my serial fiction, which I think gave me a little bit of credibility, but not too much. And so for me, making my book free to read for people who are in that subscription was essential just to get people to read my book. It's a really hard pitch to say, hey, I know you don't know me and you've never read my writing before, but why don't you pay to read it? That was just really hard to do. Whereas it was a lot easier to say, hey, you're already enrolled in this subscription and it's free to read, why don't you give it a chance? That's just a little easier of a sell to make, I found. So I published my book, enrolled it in Kindle Unlimited, and my first book didn't really do much. I'm going to be completely honest with you, and I ended up taking it off Kindle. But I found that the process was a little easier than I thought it would be. And honestly, it just felt nice. It felt good to round out this story and give it an end in the sense of editing it and publishing it and having it fully out there. Otherwise, it just sat either on Patreon behind a paywall or just in my computer. I felt like I never really completed it. And so that felt really, really nice. And so I decided to continue to do that with all of my other stories. And as I continued doing it, it got a little easier. The editing got easier. I knew really what was helpful was my editor would give me a lot of feedback. And so when I did my own edits, and then when I was writing moving forward, I could just implement those changes immediately. But that was really helpful. And so I continued to do this. I continued to edit these books myself and upload them onto Amazon and Kindle Unlimited. And then comes the time for marketing, which for me personally is the hardest, right? It's like I've written this book, I've published it, now what? Because Amazon isn't just gonna send my book out to millions of people to read. They have no reason to do that, right? They're gonna promote the books that are already doing well, that they know people want to read. And so a lot of that marketing, when you are self-published, falls onto you. You are the person, you don't have an agent, you don't have a publisher that's going to promote those books for you. You have to do it yourself, and that can be really hard. For me, what I found worked best was posting videos on TikTok. Essentially, to be blunt, I just posted thirst traps of my books. Sometimes it was quotes, sometimes it was just jokes about things I'd written, to try to entice people to go onto Kindle and read it. And it took several years of that. I would say about 2 years of posting pretty consistently for things to start to take off. And eventually you get to a point where you're not the one having to do all of this marketing because somebody will read your book and they'll love it and then they'll make a video about it, or they'll tell a friend about it. And I'm not gonna lie about that. That is not easy and it's not for the faint of heart. And so if you are gonna go a non-traditional route, that is something to keep in mind. You have to do a lot of work there to get your book in front of eyes. But you don't always have to do TikTok. I know Instagram has worked really well for a lot of people. I know there are a lot of really amazing Facebook groups you can join full of authors that give a lot of tips. Some people, I believe, use Reddit. There are just so many different ways. And now I am working on expanding a little bit more outside of serial books, or outside of serial fiction on Patreon and ebooks on Kindle Unlimited. Paperbacks is something I'm kind of working on in the background, but to be honest, paperbacks are just a lot harder to sell, so they're not a huge focus for me. What I am focusing on right now are getting ebooks up, which is something a lot of people ask me about. I'm in the works on it. It was another thing that I have to admit I have been avoiding for several years because it seems very overwhelming, and I know it can be pretty expensive upfront to be paying audiobook narrators and all of this. And I've been really fortunate that a publisher reached out to me because they were interested in publishing my audiobooks for me, and thankfully doing a lot of that work that I have been too intimidated to even attempt to think about trying. And so that's something that's been in the process for a while, just trying to do more partnerships in general. A subscription service reached out to me. It's a book subscription box. And so they want to have me as their featured book for 1 month. That's really exciting. So I've been working on that. And so that's really kind of my big thing now, is just branching out and finding other ways to get my book out there that's not TikTok, Kindle Unlimited, and Patreon. It's definitely a work in progress. It's not easy, but for me, I mean, if I could do it all over again, I would choose this route over traditional publishing, just because there's no guarantee with traditional publishing that your book's going to be picked up, and even if it is, it can be a several-year wait, and I just didn't necessarily have the patience or the confidence. Even when I first started out, I didn't have the confidence that my books would be good enough to get picked up by a traditional publisher, so I didn't want to waste my time trying. I'm very happy with it. I'm still working on it. It's a constant work in progress. There's always something to be done. But I hope this is helpful if anybody out there is considering becoming an author. I mean, you don't have to follow the traditional route. Creative and you're willing to do the work, you can be an author, you can self-publish. It's just a matter of finding your niche and finding what strategy is going to work best for you. For some people, Patreon wouldn't work for them, or maybe Kindle Unlimited wouldn't work for them, right? There's a lot of different options, and it's just a matter of finding which one's going to be right for you. I hope this was helpful. Bye.